Expelliarmus! This method of machining was developed using personal observation and 5 years testing. While it works well for me, use at your own risk. Hello fellow CNCnutz, and welcome to the Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and CNC. They seem to have a bit in common at times. I'll explain this later. Those of you who watched my last video would have seen me machining up a very large train. And the more observant of you would have noticed that I didn't use holding tabs when I cut out any of the pieces. And there was a good reason for that. This particular project was very large, as you noticed, and had a whole lot of pieces. To be precise, it had 442 separate toolpaths. A small piece like this here has 10 separate toolpaths to hold it. If on average I put 4 holding tabs per toolpath, that's 40 holding tabs for this one piece alone. Now, not all pieces were that small. We have larger pieces like this, and this is only one of the medium-sized pieces, and it would require a lot more than 4 holding tabs. Obviously, you wouldn't put 4 holding tabs in these little pieces, but probably 3. And so averaging that out at 4 holding tabs per toolpath, you're now looking at an excess of 1,700 holding tabs that you need to deal with at the end of the cut. Now, the great thing about VCarve Pro is it can automatically put holding tabs in for you, but there are problems with that. If we have a piece like this here, we can put our 4 holding tabs on it, but VCarve Pro may not put them, say, at these 4 points here. Where you and I would put them, it may put them quite close into one of these corners. So that means we need to go through and vet each and every component to make sure that a holding tab hasn't been put somewhere inaccessible to a flush trim bit to remove it. Likewise, a piece like this here with one of these small slots, my flush trim bit won't fit in there, so any holding tabs that go in here have to be removed manually. So am I being lazy and not putting them in? 1,700 holding tabs. I don't really feel like having to put them into the drawing to start with and then remove them after it's finished. So if I can do it without the holding tabs, then to me, it's well worthwhile. Now, I realise there are occasions when I'm probably going to screw up and it's probably going to take out a piece as I'm doing the cutting. So I basically have to accept that. So what happens to all these little bits here that break free from the inside of these cuts here? Are they picked up and flung across the workshop at high speed? No, they're not. In actual fact, the vacuum is likely to suck them up, depending on what sort of horsepower your vacuum dust collection actually is. Or as you can see here, I've got a dust shoe on mine. That would hold it in place. Usually what happens is those pieces just sit there looking silly in the hole that they will cut out of. Sometimes they pop up a little bit, and sometimes they will pop all the way out. In actual fact, the bristles on the dust shoe here can sometimes pull those there out. And that's where this here comes in. The magic wand. It's used to simply brush them away. You can flick in under the dust shoe, keeps your fingers right out of the way. And if you're wondering what this is, it's a chopstick. For some reason I only own one of them, and I don't know why. But it's very useful for this here. It's quite springy and really good. What I don't do is I don't use it to put tension on the piece to hold it in place. I usually find doing that will cause marks on the finished cut. But when cutting something like this here, and it cuts around the outside, when it finally breaks free, what normally happens, it normally just pushes it aside and it just sits there. Usually what you will find is there's a tiny little piece of wood that sits outside of here that didn't get cut when it broke free, where the two halves of the cut sort of meet like that. Sort of like a bit of a holding tab, so it's no worse to remove than a holding tab. On the inside, of course, you'll always get the nice finished cut because it's the piece that breaks away from the inside that will have that little extra bit on it. Now, before you rush out and start using this method for cutting materials, there are some rules to be observed. The first one is don't do it on thin material, it just doesn't work. The piece is likely to be flipped up out of that material and then clipped by the cutter and damaged. The second is only ever do it when you're using a down cutting spiral bit. An up cutting spiral bit will pull those parts out. It also cleans out the slots. The down cutting bit tends to pack all the chips into those slots, which can hold the pieces. Also, you need to be prepared that you may damage a part, so don't do it on anything critical. Anything you can't afford to recut, then don't even contemplate doing it. In fact, I don't really recommend not using holding tabs. It's a personal thing for me, whether I do or not. I pick and choose my battles carefully, and but I do just want to explain in this particular instance why on this particular project, the train project, I did not use any holding tabs. So the consequences are you will eventually or inevitably damage a part every now and then, and as you can see here, that should be a straight line and it isn't. There's a notch being cut in here, and that's because this broke away and got clipped by the cutter. It moved to the side and the cutter ran down the side and of course just cut away that material. Another consequence could well be a broken cutter. If a piece stands up on its edge and the cutter comes along, it could just snap the cutter. So when making files for doing this here, I make sure the cutter raises quite high, say an inch or so, to ensure that if a piece does leap up sideways and a bit proud of the material, it won't be clipped as the cutter moves to the next cut. Don't do it on thin materials. Anything less than ½ inch, it won't work. If you want to eliminate holding tabs on something like that, you need to look at something like a vacuum table. Sounds like a good project for another day. Next, don't do it if you're using an up cutting bit. Only do it using down cutting bits, because a down cutting bit will push the material down or the pieces down into the stock, especially as it lifts the cutter out. It also packs the chips and dust into the slots so that it tends to hold the piece in place. Let's see this in action, both MDF and plywood. So as you can see, it cut these parts out without them falling out or coming out. Let's see how easy they are to remove. I'll manage to get that part out all right. You can see here the layer of MDF dust that's actually holding it in place, and it has actually taken quite a bit of effort to remove them. There's no way this was going to fall out, and in actual fact I can't get this one here out at all. I'm going to have to take it off the table here and turn it over. You can see it is cut all the way through. I basically got to push it through from the back to get it out. So it was definitely well held in there. Let's see how plywood does. It looks like all the pieces have been held firmly in place by the wood chip here. There's certainly a lot more loss of wood chip in here, and around here it's actually right down to the spoil board, probably because it was pulling air through the slot here. And again, some of this is a wee bit emptier than the MDF one here, but nonetheless these are firmly held in place, so I should be able to pull these here out without too much difficulty. And you can see the wood chip that's left in here. This small bit here is likely to be the one piece that might be flipped up like so while it's being machined. If it does, the ideal tool is a chopstick. Get in there and flick it out of the way. You can get it out from underneath the dust shoe without having to stop the machine. So, got to get that out of there. There we go. And the Y. So the next question is, what happens if our little offcut here gets a bit too friendly with the cutter? I'll try both the plywood and the MDF. Well, that's almost disappointing, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a bigger, wider, flatter piece of material to trap it between the blade and between the cutter and the piece of wood here. Now, I'm running my router at 10,000 RPM, which is the normal speed I run mine at. That is about as far as the pieces are flung, and they're barely moving it as well. The dust shoe would easily have stopped these here going. There's just no power behind it. The cutter here isn't imparting a lot of energy to it. I'll raise the cutter up a bit more to see if the tip of the cutter can make it do something else. Now, it must be noted that this is not a scientific test, but in 5 years of using this method, I've never seen a piece thrown across the workshop yet. But because it hasn't happened today doesn't mean it won't happen tomorrow. I mean, that's the basic principle on which we buy lottery tickets. Don't do it using large cutters, nothing larger than 1/8 of an inch. I haven't tried a larger cutter, but I think the larger the cutter, the more likely it is that the slots will clear out and it may break free. Bigger cutters, of course, can impart a lot more energy to a piece, which brings us to the dust shoe. I've got a dust shoe on my machine. If by some miracle the cutter did impart a lot of energy to one of the pieces that broke away, the dust shoe bristles would stop it going very far at all. So the dust shoe also has the advantage the bristles will hold down a larger piece if it's covering it and stop it from coming up as the cutter is withdrawn from the stock. Now, there are some advantages to not having holding tabs. The first I mentioned earlier, 1700 advantages in the case of my train project. I didn't need to put the damn things in, and I didn't need to clean them up when I'd finished. But there are other advantages as well. When you're cutting your project, you can immediately remove the piece from the stock and do whatever little bit of cleanup may be necessary on it while you're waiting for the next piece to cut. Keeps you somewhat occupied, and especially on a project like this here, which took a lot of cutting. I was able to remove the pieces, give them a quick touch up with the sandpaper, and just add them to the pile ready to assemble. And if I had enough of the right pieces, I could start assembling them as I was waiting for the next piece to cut as well, which was quite good. Now, another important consideration is what type of material you're cutting. In this case, my train project is cut from 1/2-inch plywood, and as you're probably aware, plywood can buckle and twist without much encouragement at all. That nice flat sheet you brought this morning at your local wood shop is now this great big twisted thing sitting in your workshop, because as moisture contents changes, the stresses change within the plywood and it just buckles, something terrible. You cut the piece up and bolt it down to your table. Now you've put the piece of plywood under tension. Even if it wasn't under tension and was nice and flat, once you start cutting it, it can actually start bowing and buckling as it goes. And that was what the problem was with this piece, where this piece here got the notch cut out of it. It did look pretty flat when it was on the table. In fact, I chose one of the flattest pieces I had for cutting this piece, but once it started cutting a couple of these here out and got to this one, the tensions had been released that much that the wood actually started to bow like this here. Now, because the wood's now up off the tabletop, any holding tabs that I would have put on this thing here would have been cut through by the cutter, because of course the wood was now much further off the table. And you don't want to go putting really thick holding tabs on it. You want the holding tabs to be reasonably sized. Now, I could have perhaps gone through and added additional fixing, maybe screwed or nailed the centre of the plywood down to the table, but I'm not a big fan of that. But that is always an option, and that will help prevent a bit of buckling of the plywood as well. But in my case, yes, it buckled up, and then it just cut free prematurely, and it got clipped by the cutter. So not a big problem. Like I said, if you're going to do this, you need to be prepared to remachine your part if something like that happens. And so here's the $64,000 question. With the benefit of hindsight, and if I had to do this project again, would I do it without holding tabs? And the answer is yes and no. What I would do is, on the small pieces like this here, I would add a few holding tabs to hold these in place. Because these are so small and light, the centre's gone from, I wouldn't put holding tabs in the centre. I would put a couple around the outside, because when these ones cut, they're so light, the cutter rubbing against the side can actually cause this here to spin a little bit here, and it can just nick this piece here as the cutter is withdrawn from the project. So I tend to put a couple of holding tabs, maybe 3 or 4, on these tiny little pieces. A piece like this here, which really isn't much bigger really, actually has quite a bit of weight from it, and it just pushes away from the cutter. None of these here had any marks on it. I had to remachine up about 4 of these ones here, so not a big issue. But I think it's worth, on the tiny light pieces like this here, a few holding tabs just to hold it in place. Now, one of the other things I wish I'd done on this project was I'd put a new cutter into the machine before I started cutting. What I forgot is this one here was already about 3 months old before I even started this project, and it's done a lot of work. What I found is as the cut progressed, that especially on the second sheet, that the fibres at the top of the plywood weren't cutting as well as they should have. Also, the slots were tending to be emptier. The sawdust wasn't being packed in there as I expected it to be, and I still don't know why that is. I would have thought it would have done that regardless, but as soon as I changed to a new cutter, it packed those chips in there nicely, which held those parts nice and firmly in place. So if if I thought I would have replaced the cutter before I even started. So just to recap, I'm not suggesting that you do your projects without holding tabs. I'm simply explaining how and why I didn't use them on my last project. Whatever you do, don't go following something you see some other idiot doing on YouTube. Make your own decision as to whether it's a good idea or not. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. Don't forget to check out my website, www.CNCnutz.com. In the meantime, thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that little bell symbol you see beside the subscribe button. That way you'll be notified of all new episodes as they're released. Until next time, guys, cheers.